Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it a minute or so whilst people dial in and get their connections up and running. Okay, so we will start in around 1 minute. Welcome to you all. Good morning, good afternoon. If you're dialing in from further ashore, we never quite know where people dial in from nowadays. Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So welcome everyone to this morning's webinar. Not having the conversation is not helping. We're delighted to be here on behalf of the City and Guilds Foundation. The Oxford Group is a City and Guilds business, and we're always delighted to be able to fulfill our purpose of leadership matters by supporting varying different development activities through the foundation. So my name's Andy Dent. I'm one of the directors here at the Oxford Group, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Maggie Matthews.
Thank you very much, Andy. I was dying to speak there. It was very difficult for me not to open my mouth in those first few minutes. So I'm Maggie, Associate Director here at the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group, for those of you who don't know, is a global leadership and management development consultancy. We work with leaders across many sectors and many organizations, supporting the leadership development agenda and the talent development agenda. From face-to-face, virtual, blended, we design and deliver on behalf of our clients. So it's great to be here today to share our thoughts and some of the work that we do with our clients actually around this whole theme. So good to be here today. And I guess that takes me to why conversations matter. One of our strap lines is we believe leadership matters. Actually, the second one would be we believe conversations at work matter. And this is a theme of a lot of the work that we're doing now with our clients. And not a theme just coming from us, although it certainly featured strongly in our recent research around psychological safety and the importance of having conversations. It's also coming through in the work of the research through Gallup, McKinsey, and also much of the work that we read around leadership. For example, Amy Edmondson's The Fearless Organization. A lot of it is telling us, and I like McKinsey's phrase actually, employees want interactions, not just transactions. So they want their leadership team, particularly their direct line managers, to engage with them, understand them, know more about them than just how they do their job and when they do their job and where they do their job. So it's more to it than that. So we will be sharing some of that today in the session. So Andy, over to you to talk a little bit more about the focus of today.
Thanks, Maggie. So our aim really today in the time that we've got together is to share what we see as a really, really powerful fusion of two approaches, I guess. One being the work of Kim Scott, Radical Candor, which some of you may have read, and also our very own 5 conversations approach. And we fundamentally believe that the fusion of these two things really help bridge what we see as the knowing-doing gap. Because we all know, I think, as leaders, fundamentally, the benefits of tackling unhelpful behaviour and the consequences if we don't go there, and what we maybe have to deal with as a consequence of not having conversations. But we also know it really isn't easy. No matter how many times I deliver this type of programme, it's still really difficult for me stepping into challenging conversations. Because there's all of that anxiety, that uncomfortableness that comes with it. You don't want to damage the relationship. So our work today is to help you enter into the right mindset, the right awareness and the right preparation to step into the conversations that maybe you've been putting off. And I think we all put things off, put these types of conversation off. So hopefully today will help you step into some of those conversations that are maybe going to be really important to you, to help your people, actually, to help their development. So let's firstly have a quick look at Radical Candor. And in the Radical Candor model, it's based on two core continuums. So how much we're willing to challenge directly, but how much do we care personally about the individual when we're stepping into share information or insight or data or observations with them. Now, the top right is what is Radical Candor itself. And Radical Candor is where we care enough about the person that we're going to share with something with them that we think will help them grow, with good intent, but in a way that is straightforward and will have some benefit to them, hopefully, from our perspective. So it comes from a really good place. It comes with good intention. It would be clean. It would be precise. It would be non-judgmental in language. And we think about all of this stuff in advance to make sure we give the person the best possible chance of absorbing this data, this information, this insight, to allow them to grow. So we really think carefully about how we're going to position it with that person. And there's a lot more detail in, I mean, I've literally covered off Radical Candor, which is a 200-page book, in about 2 minutes there. So there's a lot more to dig into. And if you do find the approach interesting, Kim Scott and the Radical Candor team have also got a great podcast as well that you might want to dial into. And they talk about real live challenges that leaders face in modern organizations. So a bit of a shout out to that if that's useful for you. So for me, the point of what we're going to share now isn't actually Radical Candor itself, actually. It's what we become if we're not in that radically candid quadrant. And they're probably not things that we would want to be, and maybe we're unconsciously sat in some of these areas. And I know leaders, we're not perfect, so it's likely we fall into these boxes from time to time. But here is the first one. The first one is obnoxiously aggressive. And this is where we challenge directly, but without the due care and attention to really think about the individual and how they may receive our insight. So it could play out as confrontational criticism. It could play out in front of a group. It might feel quite personal because we might use some judgment within our sharing of this information. We might not take the care and attention to really think about being specific and careful about the language that we use. So it might feel like a character attack. And I don't know about you, but whenever anyone attacks my character, I probably shut down, and I'm less likely to take on board some of the real development. I'm probably more likely to move into defensive mode with the walls coming up and having an emotional reaction from that. However, the one thing I will say about obnoxious aggression, as much as we probably wouldn't want to be in this space, at least the person knows something. They've got some level of insight that something they're doing might not be quite right, but it hasn't been delivered in the right way. So we then move on to manipulative insincerity. And this is a really interesting one, because this is the one where maybe we don't care enough to challenge directly. It might be that it's not a priority for us. We've got lots of other things on, and leaning into that and giving the energy to kind of go there and share this insight with someone maybe just isn't as important to us. And we're not in that moment caring enough about them personally to go there. So this is where potentially we could purposely let someone continue with a behavior, or unconsciously we just let it carry on without doing anything about it. And that might not be helpful for the person in the short term or the long term, and we probably know it, but for whatever reason we're not leaning into it. So there's a little bit of a level of falseness that might play out here, and it could potentially come across, if unchallenged, the other person might think you're doing it for political gain. And it might, always highly likely, if people realize further down the line, it's going to lead to a manifestation of mistrust in the relationship. And then last but not least, we've got good old ruinous empathy. And this is the probably the one where a lot of people end up, because we do care about the person, but for whatever reason, either we're not brave enough to go there and challenge directly, we're not in the right headspace ourselves, maybe we lack some of the skills or the time to practice or talk these things through, so we don't go there and challenge directly. We don't share the insight with someone that could really help them. And I know there's been a number of occasions where I look back where I have gone into a one-to-one with a team member in roles gone by, where I thought, you know what, I've got this really important insight that I need to give them based on their performance that I know could make them better and could improve them and help them to build their self-awareness. And I go into that meeting at the end of it, I think, how did I not deliver that? I was determined, I had a plan, but for whatever reason, I stepped away from it. So this one is the one where if we don't share it with someone, it leads to ignorance, and they may continue that ignorance because they don't know that you're not shining the light on something that could help them move forward. So the key here is, if we're not radically candid, we're one of the other three. And I know for sure we probably don't want to be one of the other three. And Maggie and I had a really, really interesting conversation when we were kind of prepping for this, didn't we, Maggie?
We did. I think partly because I've come quite late to Kim Scott, actually, Andy. I know you've read Kim Scott and you've talked about Kim Scott to me over many years, actually. And I've said, yeah, I will read it, Andy. I will read it. I've got my stack and I'll get there. And I came quite late, probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 9 months ago or something, where I really dived into this. And I guess the language is really emotive. So obnoxious, manipulative, ruinous. I found those 3 things really personally challenging, because without the language, actually, without that quite emotive language, I've actually been in all those 3 other spaces. I spend time in those 3 other spaces, and I found it quite emotionally challenging for myself to realize that it's the impact is as dramatic as this suggests it is, and I guess maybe it always isn't as dramatic. So I've sometimes been in this bottom left, this manipulative insincerity, not consciously being manipulative and not consciously being insincere, actually, but either I haven't got time, or I've tried so many times before that I've just given up, being in that space where I want to help somebody learn or grow from a situation. So I found myself in there. I've definitely found myself in the ruinous empathy space a lot. And again, that has, when I read this initially, I'm really examining myself a lot more now about what's stopping me in those moments where there is an opportunity for someone to develop and grow. What is stopping me from doing that? And I think we talk about it a lot, and I think there's something about the work we put into a relationship. It's much easier to be radically candid. Get that right. I was going to be radically candorous. It's not right. To be radically candid with somebody when we have a relationship with them, when we have already got the trust and we've already got the safety in place. So the work I was thinking about doing is not actually in the moment of where I'm giving feedback. The work is all around that. It's before I even get to that point. So that was some of the stuff I was thinking about, really, and it's challenged me personally about when I hold back and why I hold back and the impact that has and what that might say about me as much as it does about the other person. So that's my little spiel, Andy.
Thanks, Maggie. Some confessions there, which I think are really, really relevant, and we've got them there, I think.
Yeah, and I was just it's making me think actually about you guys as you're listening to this, and please feel free to share in chat or just think in your own mind. What about you really? Where are you in the various different relationships and situations in terms of the opportunities to give feedback? And the opportunity to give feedback is about supporting people to grow or develop, or to put them, help them get onto the right path. And I always say, if I'm ready to give somebody feedback, I've already also got to be ready to receive it, and to make that a two-way piece. So yeah, if anybody's got any comment, feel free to speak or chat on that from your own experience or knowledge of Kim Scott's Radical Candor. That's all right. It might take a little bit of reflection. This was a few weeks of the penny dropping for me, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah, thanks, Andy. So I guess where does that all fit with because you talked about at the beginning Kim Scott's Radical Candor, and we like to partner with that, the Oxford Group's 5 Conversations work. And for those who are aware, the Oxford Group, we have put a lot of research and thinking into what we see as the 5 conversations that will support the transformation of trust and engagement and subsequently performance. And for me, if we want to be radically candid with people, the relationship is really important. So the effort we put into all of the conversations, not just the feedback conversations, is really key. A bit of background on 5 Conversations. We developed these, an early prototype, when we did some work with AstraZeneca, the research and development team within AstraZeneca, where they wanted their engagement surveys were showing a disconnect between direct reports and their team members about the quality of the relationships and the quality of the conversations and the direction, the support they were getting. And they called us in to help them with that. And from that, we identified key conversations at AstraZeneca that need to happen in order for that relationship to strengthen and for that engagement impact to be positively affected. We've since developed that whole model. We've since developed that whole piece, and there's a book and there's an associated training program around it. And a lot of the new insights and research from neurodiversity and psychological safety, we've now updated through, I think it's our 3rd version of the book now that we've updated with some of that new thinking, which actually hasn't changed the concept. It's just strengthened actually our own original research and thinking around that. Today we're going to focus on Conversation 4, and Andy's going to take us through when we talk to people, this is Conversation 4, which is challenging unhelpful behaviour, is the one that people can find most challenging, but actually it can be the most rewarding when we get it right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess building on that, Maggie, we look at this conversation as a real opportunity to get into a dialogue with someone. And it's very much a two-way exchange, which you'll see in a second with the model that powers it, so that we go away with some really good, well, both parties go away with some data, some understanding, some insight that we didn't have before. So challenging unhelpful behaviour is based on the work of Marshall Rosenberg, who was he's sadly no longer with us, but a phenomenally powerful and engaging individual that did a lot of work in the field of mediation, I suppose, bringing 2 parties that were polar opposites in terms of views together. So a lot of his work was in the civil rights movement in the US, from kind of high level national political viewpoints and bringing people together. And he used or founded non-violent communication. And non-violent communication is an approach that's based on 3 core pillars. Firstly, it's essential that we have an awareness of what's going on with us, you know what I mean, what's going on in us, and also for us to be able to name that. So for us to be able to name the feelings that we've got, and to be able to also be aware of the feelings we've got going into these types of conversations. So it's a real self-knowing, a real self-awareness, and being able to name things in a really, really clean way. The next thing is about empathy, and that is about the fact there's 2 people in this conversation, and we're leading with the point to understand. We want to understand what's going on for the other person, because most of the time people don't show up at work to do a bad job. There's probably something in the system or something that's getting in the way that hopefully we can help to understand and remove. Not always the case. Sometimes we get to the point where we can't solve everything, but if we lead initially with the fact that we really want to listen, we want to understand the other person, notwithstanding the fact that we also need to be straightforward, because there's obviously a reason for us having this type of conversation. So we need to express our views authentically in a straightforward way, but so that the other person can understand how it's unhelpful and what they need to do to move forward, but also in a way that we want them to be straightforward with us as well, so we can actually work together to solve this challenge and this issue. So the non-violent communication flow looks a bit like this. I'm going to go through it super quick, and then Maggie and I are just going to play something out really quickly. So what we would get into is some clean observations of what happened, what did we see, how did that make us feel, and naming that feeling. And then we want to pass over to the other side to understand what was going on for you in that moment and how was that making you feel, what were the emotions that were bubbling up inside you. Once we've understood that, we can then go to the needs, and it's really important to be able to name the needs that we want or need in those similar types of situations, so someone can understand our perspective. Once they've understood what our needs are, we can then get into what are your needs moving forward. And finally, we make this really solid request, having understood everything else that's above, of one another. So potentially me as the leader make a request of, someone's behavior changing in some way, or what I'd like to see happen moving forward. But I also chuck it across the other person and say, look, what do you need from me to make sure this doesn't happen again? Have you got any requests of me? So it's a very two-way dialogue. We're going to play this out relatively quickly, and then we're going to give you some space to explore the model and see if there's a way that you can apply it for a real life scenario that you're dealing with now, or reflecting back on a challenge of the past maybe. So let me paint the picture here. So let's just say, for this fictitious real play example, I'm going to be Maggie's line manager. And Maggie and I were in a team meeting yesterday with another 3 or 4 colleagues. Maggie had her phone with her. I noticed that she was on her phone a number of times throughout the meeting. And she kept looking out the window, and there was an occasion where she cut one of her colleagues off mid-sentence. So I've decided, actually, I need to deal with this. It's maybe there's been little things like this in the past, but this was slightly different, and I want to get into it because it created a bit of a bad vibe in the meeting. So that's the backdrop. Here goes nothing, Maggie. Action, as they say. Hey, Maggie. Thanks for dialing in today. I just wanted to touch base on yesterday's team meeting. I noticed a couple of times in the meeting that I say a couple of times, it was probably about 4 times I counted, that you were on your phone for quite a significant period of time, 20, 30 seconds at a time when other colleagues were talking. And I also noted there was a point in the meeting where Charlie was speaking, and you leaned forward on your chair and you talked over him, and you talked for 2 or 3 minutes and then sat back in your chair and went back on your phone. It made me, I've got to be honest, it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable for me and for the team. And it made me feel like maybe there's something going on that I don't know about. That's not behavior we normally see from you. So just wondered what was going on for you in that meeting.
Okay. Yeah. So look, I'm sorry, Andy. There's quite a bit going on at home at the moment. So I was distracted in our meeting yesterday, and yeah, and to be fair, I didn't even notice that it was impacting the meeting. I thought I was being discreet. So yeah, so I am sorry. I've just been dealing with some stuff at the moment. So I guess, yeah, I probably should have said something or told you something before the meeting started, or maybe, yeah. So apologies, and yeah, sorry about that.
No problems, Maggie. I didn't realise that there's anything going on. So thanks for sharing that. I guess as you know, those meetings are a space where we all come together to collaborate, and we need to feel it's a safe space to share and to engage, and everybody's contributing. Had I known in advance there was something going on for you, then maybe we could have decided that you didn't even need to be in the meeting. What about you? If you've got situations like that, have you got any? What would have been better for you? What would have been a need that you could have used?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got some stuff going on at home. I probably needed not to be. In fact, I needed to be at home. I didn't. I was at home. It was a virtual meeting, but I needed to be at home. I needed to just focus on what was going on at home. So I should have flagged, I guess, but I wasn't sure I could. I know how important the meetings are to you, so so maybe I just shouldn't have been there, or maybe I should have flagged to you. So I was trying to do both things at the same
No,
time.
I appreciate that. Yes, difficult. Okay, so I guess moving forward, if we're ever faced with a similar situation where you've got things going on, I would always want you to be where you need to be. If your energy can't be in the room, and then please just let me know. I trust you. If we don't get a chance to connect, just drop me a note on Teams. Just let me know what's going on. Okay, so what can I do? Is there anything else I can do to help make sure this doesn't happen again? Anything else you need from me?
No, I guess I just didn't have time to think. So it's helpful to know that I can do that. In fact, maybe we need to have a bigger conversation to talk through some of the stuff that's happening around at home at the moment, and figure out how I navigate that. And I guess even maybe just we used to do check-ins before all of our meetings. That might have been useful, just to spend a few minutes at the start checking in, because that would have been a good opportunity for me to maybe share what was going on, and then we could have discussed it. But equally, I probably should have made a better choice about whether to be there or not, or how to handle it. So I don't want to blow it out of proproportion, but it's
no, of course. Yeah. No, of course. Just help me out. The check-in that you mentioned, which is absolutely fine. Would that be more helpful for you before the meeting, or at the start of the meeting?
No, at the start. Yeah, no, at the start with everyone, it's okay. I mean, it just a check-in. It would have given me the chance to flag I was having a challenge, and then I hear you now about permission not to be there. That's helpful, because I know how important particularly that meeting is for us all to connect together. So I didn't want to miss it for that reason.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, but obviously want you to make sure you're in the right headspace. That's more important. So thanks for sharing, and let's get that meeting in when you feel it's right to talk about things more generally. Happy to be led by you in terms of when that is.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cut.
So the one thing I like about that conversation is, because typically as a manager you might have stopped at I'm really sorry, I've got a lot of stuff going on at home, and the manager was, oh, okay, don't worry, fine, cool, let's get on. But this takes you down. It just takes you to a deeper conversation, and it's certainly more assertive from the manager's perspective, to sort of set out needs and requests. I think that's what it felt like from where I was sitting.
And I think one of the important things to note, when Maggie and I do these little demos, I never know how Maggie's going to go with it, which kind of means that in the moment, like for real, you would be thinking, where's this going? And obviously it's slightly easier because we knew broadly what the scenario was going to be, but some of the anxiety is always, what's someone going to say back to me, and how do I respond in the moment? And having some level of a plan in terms of, well, what are your observations, feelings, needs, and requests noted down so you can refer to them, is probably one of the biggest anchors that you can have for these types of conversations, because then you're not worried so much about the core points that you want to make, and you can roll with how the conversation goes. And they're obviously all different. Some people will play ball and you'll get into a dialogue. Maggie apologized, which I wasn't expecting actually, in that moment. So it was a different dynamic to the conversation. So you never quite know what you're going to get, but if you've done your planning and your thinking, that allows you to kind of be a bit more present in the other person's moment, in the other person's shoes. So what we're going to do now is going to give you the gift of time, because it's very seldom that we get the time to think about these things. And that probably is the other thing that's really powerful, is just taking, even if just 5 minutes ahead of these types of meeting, to really sit down and gather your thoughts in line with this particular framework we find is very, very powerful. But we're going to give you just a minute or so just to think about an example that you might want to use. It might be a live conversation. Ideally, it will be a live conversation that you haven't had, that you're going to lean into, because you'll get the most value from them. Failing that, if you don't feel comfortable talking about that in a breakout room with someone that you may not know, then you could think about a previous example, or come up with a more generic kind of topic that you might need to deal with. It's up to you. We want you to feel comfortable. So we're just going to give you 2 minutes of quiet time just to reflect now on that model and on a specific example that we might want to take into the breakout room in a bit. Okay, hopefully you've all had a bit of time to think and you've got an example to work with. It might be useful, if you want to, just to take either a screenshot or a picture with your smartphone of the flow of the model, because it might be helpful in the breakout rooms that we move into. So I'll just leave this here just for a few more seconds so you can get a screen grab if that's useful. Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do, we're going to put you into pairs in a second. You go into a breakout room, you have 20 minutes, so a good period of time, and then we'll come back and close out, really, taking a couple of perspectives maybe. And what we want you to do is we want you just to quickly explain to your colleague what the unhelpful behavior, what is the scenario, and talk through your plan. So what are the thoughts that you jotted down, maybe in line with the model that we shared? And that's a good opportunity just to get some input from an impartial person. So maybe testing out how another perspective, which I think is always really, really useful. In fact, Maggie and I had a conversation this morning where I took on board some of her views based on how I'm going to deal with a particular situation. Not quite the same as this, but I think a second opinion is always really helpful to refine your approach. Then what we are going to do is ask you just to real play. So go into it as if you're entering into that conversation and just practice the opening part, really. The bit that is where you're talking about the observations and the feelings is probably enough. Just how you step into the conversation, how you position it. And that will give you the opportunity to get some feedback from your partner in terms of how it landed for them, how it felt. And very often when we talk things out loud, it feels a bit different, and it allows us to either validate this is the right approach or maybe look at course correcting slightly. So hopefully everybody is okay with what we're requesting. So you'll do that one way and then we'll switch over. So in the 20 minutes, you'll both have chance to engage. So Michelle, our producer today, is going to kindly put everyone into a breakout room, I believe, a paired breakout. So I'll hand over to you, Michelle.
Just moving across now. Sorry, they had a minute, so they'll come back, or they can choose to come back. So they'll be back any second now.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, welcome back. There's still a few smiles, so that can't have been too bad as an experience. Thank you for putting yourself into that space, everyone. I hope you found it a useful learning opportunity, and we're interested in chat. We want to ask you to share openly. We're interested in chat. If there's anything that you want to share about your experience, any specific learning, or anything that you might do differently next time, so do share that with us. And I guess as we mentioned as we introduced conversation 4, which is around challenging unhelpful behaviour, the whole reason conversation 4 can work, and the whole reason it's an easier conversation to have, is when you also have established a routine or a pattern or a way of working, which covers the other 4 conversations as well. And that's effectively they're the foundations. All of these are the foundations for that radical candor, being able to have such a relationship with a direct report, a stakeholder, a colleague, a boss, so that you are able to openly have conversation 4 in a way that's comfortable for you. So it's just, I always ask people to think about the conversations that you have with some of those key people, and where your strengths are, and maybe where it's not so strong, in terms of the 5 conversations: the building trust, the mutual expectations, the showing appreciation, the challenging unhelpful behavior, and building for the future. Where are your strengths? Where are you not so strong? And there's some of the areas to work on. If you haven't heard us talk about the other conversations besides conversation 4, there's lots of information on the Oxford Group website. We'll send a link, I think, with this, so that you can have a look. We've done some pre-recordings that go into detail in each of the 5 conversations. So thank you for giving that a go, and thanks, Stuart. Nice to hear the gift of time that you have. We don't very often do it, and 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time. It isn't, but you can get a lot done in a focused conversation in 10 minutes. So thank you for that. Andy, over to you to close us down today. We're galloping towards our end time.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. So I guess if you want to stay in touch with the Oxford Group and pick up on, we do lots and lots of content. We've got lots of stuff on our YouTube channel. We do lots of webinars and lots of events and other things that you may well be interested in. So there is a QR code there. Should you wish to scan it, it takes you to the area of our website that you can just sign up for our newsletter, or you can follow us in the usual places. Most of our social content goes through LinkedIn, or you can just check out our website. And I suppose the last thing to do is, on behalf of the Sitting Guilds Foundation, is just to say thank you very much for joining us this morning. I believe you get a digital badge for attendance at today's session. So the team will make sure that you deliver that, and you'll also get the recording as well from today's session. So thank you for being with us, and hopefully that will help you to step into some of the conversations that we know are really important. So good luck, everyone.
Thank you, Andy. And please reach out to Andy or I if you've got any other further questions. You can find us on LinkedIn and in various places. In various places, that doesn't sound right, but anyway, reach out.
LinkedIn's probably best, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Take care.